The stark truth is that global wildlife populations have declined by 73% since 1970. And with our coalition representing many of the world's biggest travel and tech companies, we are uniquely positioned to drive the change that we so desperately need. 80% of tourism's value is tied to nature. And nature is worth more when our coral reefs and forests thrive, when our rivers are unpolluted and our wildlife is alive and well in their natural habitats. And although we've achieved significant milestones in our first 5 years, the journey ahead remains challenging. And no single company can tackle these issues alone. And given the headwinds we face as a global community, we must work together to drive meaningful progress. Now is the moment for the industry to reaffirm its commitment to being a force for good. Challenges will undoubtedly rise. But if there's one thing that I've learned in my life, it's that meaningful change never comes easily. The true measure of our commitment is how we respond when the path becomes difficult. We must never give up.
Ladies and gentlemen, squad family, welcome back to the Royal Sussex Squad, your favourite space where we speak truth to power and defend Harry and Meghan with unwavering passion. While the British press continues its relentless smear campaigns and royal courtiers scramble to distract from their own dysfunction, we stay focused on the facts, the heart and the humanity of the Sussexes. Now today, y'all, we've got a story that perfectly reveals just how twisted the media narrative can be and how, even oceans apart, King Charles and Prince Harry are making headlines in the same breath, but with vastly different intentions. Let's get into it. So picture this. Prince Harry in Shanghai, China, representing Travalyst, his groundbreaking sustainable travel organization. He's there speaking truth to power about the climate crisis, calling it what it is, a critical business emergency costing the global economy over $143 billion every year. And y'all, he's not just reading from a teleprompter. He's speaking from a place of conviction, passion and personal commitment. He's lived through the chaos of fame, toxic media and institutional gaslighting, and here he is using his platform to push for a better world. That's real leadership. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, King Charles is in Ottawa, Canada, opening Parliament with a carefully worded speech. Now, on the surface, it's a historic moment. Only the second time a monarch has ever done this. But underneath the polite diplomatic language was a not-so-subtle warning to China, thinly veiled in references to Canada's northern territories. He spoke of new threats and the need for Canada to strengthen its sovereignty. The Times called it a carefully crafted message to Beijing. Now here's where the media starts playing its old game again. They turn King Charles into some kind of global statesman, issuing warnings to world powers, while Harry, who is literally in the same country being discussed, is being all but ignored or subtly dismissed by royalist outlets. But here's the truth. Harry was doing real work. Real, tangible, meaningful work. He wasn't there for pomp or ceremony. He wasn't hiding behind palaces or protected by inherited status. He was there to face a very real crisis, climate change, and urging industry leaders to rise to the occasion. He spoke about accountability, about change, about the struggle to make a real difference in a world that's often resistant to progress. Let's pause and acknowledge the irony here. Charles is making veiled digs at China while Harry is actually on the ground in Shanghai building bridges, promoting sustainable travel and creating international goodwill. And still, some royal reporters have the nerve to pretend Harry's efforts are irrelevant or worse, self-serving. The audacity! It's clear that Harry represents the future, a future where royals don't just smile for the cameras and wave from balconies, but roll up their sleeves and do the work. Now let's talk about the other elephant in the room, Harry's security and his relationship, or lack thereof, with his father. We all remember that Harry recently returned to the UK for a brief visit. And what did he get for his effort? A cold shoulder and another slap in the face from the British legal system as his appeal to reinstate his security as a working royal was denied. And then he flies back to the US and drops a truth bomb in an interview that silences the spin doctors. He says bluntly that King Charles won't speak to me because of this security stuff. Not because of Meghan, not because of Netflix, not because of books or interviews, but because Harry had the nerve to ask for safety for himself and his family. That's it. And what really hit hard was Harry's deeply emotional reflection. He said he doesn't know how much longer my father has. Let that sink in. This isn't a son filled with hatred. This is a man who's hurting, who wants connection, healing, reconciliation. But all he gets is walls, silence, and coldness from an institution that seems to value protocol over people. And while all of this plays out, the press barely mentions that Harry is in China doing the kind of work the royal family should be doing, must be doing, if they want to stay relevant. Let's not forget it was Harry and Meghan, not the senior royals, who were ahead of the curve on climate action, racial equity, mental health and women's empowerment. They don't need crowns, they don't need thrones. Their power lies in purpose. And speaking of power, let's take a minute to talk about Meghan Markle. While Harry is overseas working on sustainability, Meghan continues to work behind the scenes, balancing motherhood, philanthropy and entrepreneurship. She doesn't need to be seen to be impactful, and that's why the press hates her. Because her silence is louder than their noise, because she doesn't beg for approval, because she moves with grace and unapologetic authenticity. But let's be clear. We see her. We see both of them. And we're not going to let the media gaslight us into thinking Harry and Meghan are irrelevant. No, ma'am. They're more relevant than ever. And as for King Charles, well, if you ask me, delivering a diplomatic warning is fine and dandy. But leadership isn't about speeches. It's about action. And action is exactly what Harry demonstrated in China. Let's stop pretending the institution is thriving when it's very clearly bleeding credibility. The Commonwealth is cracking, the younger generations are disengaged, and scandals are bubbling just beneath the surface. The monarchy didn't evolve, it calcified. And in their desperation to silence Harry and Meghan, they only made them more powerful. So, let's wrap it up with this truth. The Sussexes left the royal family, but they never left the work. They didn't leave service behind, they redefined it. And while the institution tries to keep up with yesterday's world, Harry and Meghan are already living in tomorrow's. King Charles has issued warning to China just hours after Prince Harry's trip to Shanghai. The monarch referenced China during his landmark speech in Canada King. Charles issued a pointed message to China during his speech at the opening of Canada's Parliament. The warning came as his son, Prince Harry, was in Shanghai, China's financial capital, representing his sustainable travel organisation, Travalyst. At the same time, Charles was speaking in Ottawa about the challenges facing Canada after being invited to open Parliament by Prime Minister Mark Carney. Becoming only the second monarch to do so, in his speech as Canada's head of state, Charles outlined the nation's need to be truly strong and secure. To that end, the King promised that Ottawa would invest to strengthen its presence in the north, which is an integral part of Canada, as this region faces new threats. The moment was understood to have been a carefully crafted message to China, The Times reported. Recently, Chinese and Russian naval forces have encroached on Canada's Arctic territories in a bid to exert influence on the increasingly valuable region. The international community is keenly eyeing the Canadian North as rising global temperatures melt dense Arctic ice, opening trade routes and resources for extraction. Rather appropriately, Prince Harry stressed the urgent need for action on climate change during his own speech in China. Climate change isn't just an environmental challenge, it's a critical business emergency, costing the global economy $143 billion annually, the Duke told attendees. He emphasised the travel industry's responsibility to be a force for good and shared a personal reflection on the struggles of achieving meaningful change. Harry and Meghan Markle made the permanent move to California in 2020. But a North American reunion between father and son was very unlikely, regardless of the Duke's trip over the Pacific. Harry's split from the rest of the royal family appeared to only intensify after his most recent visit to the UK, where he suffered a bruising legal disappointment after failing to have his working royal security detail reinstated. Upon returning to the US, the Duke took part in a bombshell interview where he claimed the King won't speak to me because of this security stuff. He also suggested he not know how much longer my father has, in reference to Charles's ongoing cancer treatment. In reference to Ottawa's tense relations with the US, Charles spoke of the anxiety about a drastically changing world experienced by Canadians. US President Donald Trump had repeatedly threatened to make Canada America's 51st state since returning to office in November. He has also slapped his northern neighbour with punishing trade tariffs and conducted frosty meetings with Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney and former PM Justin Trudeau. Charles's reference to a sovereign Canada that was strong and free appeared. If you felt that truth today, squad, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and show some love with a super thanks. Every contribution helps us keep this platform going and growing. Together, we uplift Harry and Meghan, we speak truth to power, and we shine light through the lies. This is the Royal Sussex Squad, where we ride for the truth and stand for the Sussexes. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.